Hey, what's up, friends? Mike Myers here with the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, episode number 13, Taylor Muse. Taylor is the lead singer and founder of the band Quiet Company based out of Austin, Texas. We talk about it all in this episode, how he listened to nothing but Christian rock, eventually got on the train to heck, and then started delving into other things, our love for Dave Bazan, his songwriting process, and what demoing looks like for him. So here we go, let's jump into it. Episode number 13, Taylor Muse.
I think we're at like 18 drummers.
My God.
Like we have had 18 drummers. Apparently, I'm hard to live with.
But isn't it's a funny thing when you lock in. It's always when they leave when you have this thought of like, we're pretty tight right now. This is great. And then it's like, hey guys, we got to talk. And it's like, okay, what's up, man? And you know it's coming.
Yeah. And it's just that thing that like tour is not for everyone. Like I can, thankfully say that out of those 18 drummers, there's only like 2 that I'm not like still good friends with. So like it rarely ends badly, but the drummer is probably one of the more intensive parts of Quiet Company. And like, so it's hard on people to come in and fill the last drummer's shoes usually. And then it's just like, not everyone wants to tour, and not everyone wants to, commit to the level that it kind of requires. And we don't really tour that much anymore, especially now, we're not touring at all. So it's super easy on everyone.
But when you guys started at the very beginning, was Quiet Company like your first, like, this band is starting to do things, or were there bands before that you were like, oh, this could be the thing, but then this band formed and you were like, I think this could do something?
Yeah, I was in a band right before Quiet Company called The Connotations, and we thought that we were going to be some pretty hot shit because we were originally from Tyler, Texas, where I had moved after high school to go do a couple of years of college, and I was in a bunch of different bands, and we started that band, and then we had a band that I used to play drums for had moved to Nashville like a year before and gotten signed, and they were about to go on this big tour, and we were like, oh, well, if it's that easy, all we need to do is move to Nashville, And so we moved up to Nashville, and, nobody cared about us at all, and rightly so in hindsight. But I remember we were very entitled. Like, I think that we really did expect the world to just discover us, like, and how great we were. And we didn't do really any actual work other than just like make songs that we thought were cool. But then the band hated living in Nashville, so we moved to Austin and played like 6 shows and broke up. But like, and from that, I decided, I was like, well, I'm not going to like I have all these songs I wrote for The Connotations. I don't really want them to I was happy with the songs still. So I decided to record the first Quiet Company record by myself, and with help of a friend from this band called the New Frontiers that unfortunately isn't around anymore. But Alex, their drummer, recorded that first Quiet Company record and played all the drums for me and stuff. And it got picked up by a small label, and then I started putting the band together, and the rest is just kind of like, Then so Quiet Company was the first band that we were like, oh, we have to tour. Like, oh, we have to get a publicist. Oh, we have to, have a steady supply of merch coming in and out, So yeah, Quiet Company was the first band that really did the work to varying degrees of success.
Are you the primary, like when you think of songwriting for your band, regardless, like, are you the primary songwriter? Like, you kind of bring fleshed out songs, rough demos. What is the process?
I am the only songwriter. Quiet Company started as like my solo thing, so that's always been the dynamic and the arrangement in terms of like songwriting. But the process of how involved the other guys are has changed as we've gone along. Like, it used to be that I would record these really fleshed out demos, and where I'd played all the parts, and like there were tons of instruments on them, and I was just kind of like, I had this very much like everything in the kitchen sink approach to songwriting. which I really do kind of think stemmed from like some insecurity about my songwriting. Like it wouldn't be interesting if I didn't just keep putting layer after layer of instrumentation on it, like,
Yeah.
which, that was totally insecurity. As the band has changed and evolved over time, I really trust all the members of the band creatively. Like I think this lineup is like, most of us kind of came from very similar scenes and backgrounds. So there's a lot more like, we're all kind of starting on the same page. And that hasn't always been the case with the lineup, but it most certainly is now. So, but however, just because of the circumstances, I'm just sitting at home recording demos all day, because I went through a process where I was just recording just an acoustic guitar and my vocals and like just sending that as a demo. Like, so there was like nothing but just the chord structure, the lyrics, and the melody, and then letting everyone kind of come in with their own ideas. And I like that idea because it's a lot of fun, and you get stranger arrangements, I think, when you have more people kind of like throwing in ideas for the arrangement.
Yeah.
But because I'm bored at home and I'm just recording demo after demo, and I'm like, well, why wouldn't I play drums on it? Well, why wouldn't I here's a bass track? Like, yeah, I got some. And I'm trying to keep them like minimal, like where it's just like drums and guitar and bass and the vocal. Like I'm not putting like a ton of like extra keyboards or a ton of extra vocal melody or harmonies and stuff. Like, so I am kind of trying to keep it a little bit basic, but they are being full band arrangements, and it's more for my listening pleasure than it is for anyone else's. But yeah, so I'm kind of back to doing that now just because of the circumstances of the pandemic.
So what was your first instrument? Because if you're doing drums, bass, was guitar your first primary instrument, or was it drums?
Well, I guess it depends on how far back you go, because I got sixth grade band. I started playing the saxophone. So, but I would never, ever play a saxophone on a recording now. But yeah, guitar was my first instrument that you could write.
Was there an album too that you like thought of, like that you wanted to pick up the guitar, or was it just kind of the whim of guitar, I'll try it?
Well, I don't know what your background is like. I was raised in a very in kind of somewhat rural Texas, to a very conservative Christian family. And so when we started getting into rock and roll, it's like we kind of lived in this Christian bubble, and we weren't really allowed to listen to that much secular music. So probably the first bands that made me think that guitar was cool were these kind of, probably they're somewhat obscure to everyone else, like Christian hair metal bands.
Stryper?
Yeah, I had Stryper. They weren't a big one for me. Bride was my number one.
Okay.
And Petra was big. We had stuff like DC Talk, of course, but like White Heart, White Cross, Tamplin, all these bands that are probably pretty terrible, but I still kind of love Bride. I won't lie about that.
It's kind of nostalgic kind of thing when you look back and you're like, yeah, this is kind of cheap, but it's like,
what's funny is like Dale Thompson, I think is his name. He's the singer of Bride. Like, he's on Facebook. You can follow him, and he's a fucking lunatic. Like, he's really entertaining. But anyway, I think so that's what I was kind of like enamored with when I first got a guitar, but at that point I wasn't as interested in songwriting just yet. Like I wanted to learn to shred,
Yeah.
And incidentally, I never learned to shred. I can't shred today, after 20 some odd years of playing guitar, because I think at some point early on I did figure out that songwriting was the truly important aspect of playing that guitar. And then I remember we were coming home from a funeral in Gilmer, which is a East Texas town. And we heard Undone, the Sweater Song, on the radio by Weezer.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time I heard that. And that was one of those kind of pivotal, like, oh, wait, there's cool stuff for me to be into, like. And so I went to Hastings and bought that cassette tape, and I just obsessed over that record. But I think the record that made me go, okay, I want to play music and I want to make records like this for the rest of my life, was probably the Smashing Pumpkins' Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness.
Now, when you were getting these records, were you like sneaking them in? Like, were you just kind of like on the side, just being like, do you have like Smashing Pumpkins in like a Hillsong case where you're just like, it's just kind of like obscured. So it just like gives the illusion that you don't see it.
No, like my parents they had kind of started being a little bit more lax about stuff. Like they were still super terrified of all of it, but they were letting me have it provided there weren't any like glaring red flags. Like Kurt Cobain had killed himself, so I was never allowed to listen to Nirvana. So you mentioned Weird Al earlier before we started recording, like, and Weird Al's Smells Like Nirvana, his spoof of Smells Like Teen Spirit, that was kind of my only tie to Nirvana, and I wore that tape out too, because especially that song, because I was like, I love this, I wish I could have the actual record.
That's Off the Deep End, the Weird Al cut, and that's still a great record. Airline Amy is still one of my favorite songs, dude.
I think that people of our generation probably still going in new generations, everyone has that one Weird Al record that is like their Weird Al record. Like for me, I have to say that I can actually think of 3 that were pretty important to me. Dare to Be Stupid is pretty great. But Off the Deep End was the first big one that I really got into. And then Alapalooza is my favorite one still. I actually put that on not too long ago, and I was just driving down the road, just cracking up, like still just, he gets me, man.
It's funny how you can remember words too to like all the Weird Al songs. Sometimes with my girlfriend, I'll just be like, I'll throw on a Weird Al version, and boom! It's just like a prophetic. Suddenly, like spirit comes over me, and then I'm saying all the phrases and all the words, and I'm like, wow, it's still in my brain,
dude. The first time, he had Bohemian Polka, which is his version of Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah,
and I remember. And I loved it. I listened to that so much. But like I said, we weren't really a secular music home. So I remember the first time I heard Bohemian Rhapsody, I was like, why is this so slow? Like, this isn't that song. Like, it felt so wrong to me. And I was like, these guys are fucking it up. But it was like the actual version, because Weird Al had ruined it for me.
But that's cool. So you're almost like your box that you were in, you were told this is how the world is, and this is what, how you kind of viewed music. Weezer and then Smashing Pumpkins were kind of like breaking a little bit of that wall, and you were kind of peering over to the other side and being like, oh,
yeah, for sure.
I could write that.
Yeah.
I should write that.
I mean, my parents were, like I said, they're really concerned that I was getting into rock and roll. And like, I have a pretty funny traumatic story about trying to buy REM's Monster with my father. But that's a whole nother thing. I don't know if anybody is that interested in that, but yeah, it was definitely one of those things where, I had to be kind of careful about what I brought into the house, and I'm not trying to make fun of them. Like they were just concerned, and I think it's kind of funny. Like I've got an 11-year-old daughter, and I've often wondered, like, are we the last generation whose music was going to freak out their parents? Because what's going to freak us out? Like, we had Marilyn Manson records. Like, what is going to freak us out?
That's true. I mean, that is a good question, because I don't know that.
And I kind of feel like we've lost a little something without having, like, you know what I mean? Because there's that, like, there's something to that about, like, rock and roll should freak out older people. Like it's like the greatest art in the world. I forget who says it, but like the highest purpose of art is to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. Yeah. And I'm like, what's going to disturb me? I own a lot of Marilyn Manson records. Like nothing, like he's the last true rock star in a way.
Like it was badass when you went to like a record store and there was like the parent advisory sticker and a parent would look up like, uh-oh. And you're like, but it's cool.
Yeah. It was almost like a there's this warning for parents, but it was this signal to kids that like, hey man, this record will make you cool, you know? Uh, but yeah, I can't imagine what my kid would bring home that I would be like, I don't want you listening to this, like, I mean, I guess there's plenty of ways, like there are things that would offend me, like rampant misogyny or, homophobia or something like racism. There's plenty of things that people could sing about that I would be like, no, fuck this. We're not having this, but I can't imagine my kid ever bringing home something that would be like that.
No, young lady, that is not going to happen. And it's just like, no, that's not going to be a thing.
Yeah.
So when you made that, so you're listening to all these things and like these ideas and you're like, okay. And I love the talk about like viewing the guitar as not like a shredding thing. But like, I always love this cool story that Mike Dirnt from Green Day said, like Billy Joe made the conscious decision to not think about being a technical player, but like, I'm just going to focus on songwriting.
Yeah.
And he was like, that was the best move he could have made, because then he ended up writing great songs. So when you started to delve into that process, was this just kind of like, did you have a vehicle for these songs, or were they just kind of like you being like, I've got these songs, what do I do?
Yeah. I mean, I gave up on shredding pretty quick because I realized that wasn't how you made a song. And like that's, and so it became really quickly, I was like, I need to learn chords, because chords are going to be the foundation that this is all built on. Right.
Yeah.
And so I actually, I know a lot of chords, like I learned all my jazz chords and shit,
Yeah.
Which nowadays I rarely use. It's like 3 chords and the truth, like it always
minor flat 5. Come on, dude. You're not pulling that into your song.
Yeah. I actually, we did a song one time, with Andy from Manchester Orchestra.
Oh, that's so cool.
And we were talking about them maybe producing a record, and it didn't end up working out with the schedules and whatnot. But like we were hanging out in Atlanta one time with them and doing this song, and it had all these like 7th chords in it,
Mm-hmm.
And Andy was just like, no, just get rid of that. Let's do the open E, And we were just like, well, don't you think this is kind of like cool and Beatlesy, And he was like, nah, fuck the Beatles. And we're like, oh, okay, fuck the Beatles. He wasn't wrong though, for that moment, and honestly, part of the reason we wanted to work with them is because we've always liked the way their guitars sound. And we never really felt like our guitars on our records sounded like our guitars in the room. And so we kind of thought like, well, these guys will know the deal. And I did learn a lot just from that real brief experience with him and Raj about, recording guitars and how to perform the guitars so that they show up on the record the way you want them to.
What's that big takeaway? I'm curious. Like what was your kind of the shift?
Just play the power chord, man. Just play the power chord, play the top 2 strings of your guitar, and everything else doesn't really matter. Like, it's just, that's the most powerful way to play it, and then there was some stuff about, how to mic your amp that we found really important. But yeah, it was one of those things where I was like, I went into that experience going like, man, my guitar's never, I feel like in the room, my guitars sound, big and badass. I was like, what guitar do you use? And he's like, oh, just this same Telecaster that I use. And it's like, okay, well, what amp are you using? And it's the same amp. Like, we're using all the same stuff, and like, why do your guitars sound amazing and mine don't?
Were you going for more like where these more complex chords where it was just like you're getting all these high strings too, and it's just like they're almost like disappearing, and you're like, where's the bulk or the body of that guitar?
Yes. Well, I think that we kind of had this idea that we needed it to fill the entire spectrum, the entire sound spectrum. Like, so we need to have a track where it's like the low kind of sounding guitars, and then we need to have some other guitar doing some real high stuff the whole time to kind of really fill it out. And now I don't think that's true, because what I really want to hear is those low guitars mostly. Like, I don't find a whole lot of just like shimmery stuff like constantly happening in the high end to be that interesting. I feel like it kind of takes away from what I usually want, which is kind of something that's a little more ballsy. And, this is all subjective to like whatever the song is, right? But generally the problem that we always had is we never felt like we had enough balls in the guitars. And So now I've kind of hit that idea that like just record the sounds you want to be actually to be there. Like, well, what I want is, the big low guitars, so that's what we should really focus on making.
But that's like, at the end, the listener isn't going to be like, man, where is the double layer, that high shimmery part? I really would have loved the song more. The lyrics speak to me, the melody speaks to me. It's great, but man, come on, guys, alternate voicings up high. I want to hear that. They're not going to, but that's interesting because it's almost like saying like, hey, take it back to the basics and not necessarily complicate the thing.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of always, like we were saying earlier, like I feel like I had this thing that stemmed from this insecurity about my songs. Whereas as I get older and maybe more confident, I'm just kind of like, man, it doesn't need to be that complicated. Like when you go back and listen to the records that really meant the most to you, and you actually sit down like with an ear for production and you listen to what they've done. Like one of the more interesting exercises for me has been to sit there and go like, what is really happening here? And realizing it's not that many things. like, okay, there's drums. Okay, there's the bass. Okay, and there's one guitar doing one simple thing, and it'll be stuff like that where you just go like, but I find this so compelling. So why do I assume that no one will find it compelling when I do something simple? And getting out of that mindset that like there's a math equation that you have to fill up before you hit the quota for what's interesting has been a big exercise for me in production.
Do you feel too it's more or less the combination of like good chords, meaningful words, and melody? Then that's where the production be like, you don't need to overcomplicate it. It's already good.
Yeah.
This is just going to help it and it's going to boost it.
Yeah, my friend Tim Palmer always says the best remedy for a bad mix is a good song, and I think that's that's kind of universal, right? Across all levels of production. Like when you think about like, there are plenty of artists out there that you would not even say, even from a performance standpoint, like maybe not even a good performance, let alone a good recording or a good production value or whatever. The performance might even be bad. Like Neil Young is not necessarily a great singer, but the songs are what are important. It doesn't matter that he doesn't have to sing like Rufus Wainwright, a perfect little angel that he is, for it to be good. It's good because the song said something meaningful. Like the melody was still cool. The chords were still interesting. And it doesn't really matter how good or bad you played them. At the end of the day, it was still a good song. So I don't know.
Yeah, no. That totally makes sense. Lyrically, as you've kind of moved, did you find that your upbringing, that kind of like that more Christian-centered upbringing, influenced lyrics, but as you moved on, it was like trying to shed off as you kind of grew essentially and just kind of like moved out? Did you kind of shed those away, or do you find that they occasionally creep in?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, you and I met, we were out pushing our record, We Are All Where We Belong, which is a big concept record about going from being a person of faith to being a atheist, essentially, and kind of what that means for you as an individual and us as a culture and all these things, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously that was a really important change for me. And I made that record with this idea that like, okay, this is a big thing in my life, but I'm going to write 15 songs about it. I'm going to say everything I want to say about it, and then I'm going to move on, and I don't have to talk about it anymore, which was obviously not true, because then I had to talk about it endlessly for like years in press, and it's been our biggest record, and I still get emails from people like about that record being important to them, which is great. It's awesome. But it's just funny how naive I was about my expectations. And, but yeah, I think growing up in that world, and also just, I still live in Texas, and even though I live in Austin, my parents still live in East Texas. My girlfriend and I just actually went there this weekend and to some really rural parts of it. And that's still, that very Bible Belty culture is still very much a part of my environment and my culture here. So yeah, I always enjoyed the imagery that religion kind of provides. And with everything that's going on in the world right now and how terrible it all is, and how, when you are raised to believe in Christ and honor Christ and worship Christ, and then you see all these people out there evoking Christ who don't know a goddamn thing about the man and clearly resent everything that he represents, then it's hard to separate yourself from that imagery even further,
Yeah. I feel like, what you described, definitely that coming to, people saying like that record mattered to them, it spoke to them. Maybe that's what drew me in when I was listening to you guys, I think, because I was kind of in that place, that
Yeah, I
like
feel
that
like we
middle
had
ground of like that
Yeah.
ground where
Yeah,
I
we
was
had
like,
conversations about it early on, didn't we?
yeah, I
That's
did,
kind of how
because
we.
I was still working at a church, but I
That's
was
right.
at that verge of like being like, I don't think I believe this.
Yeah.
And just like, still up there on a Sunday being like, yep. And that's where I was getting into things
Yeah.
like Dave Bazan and being like, hard to be. I was like, I'd love to sing this on a Sunday.
Yeah, I love
And,
that record.
like I was Ali Moss, we were talking and she was like, we just gushed over Dave Bazan because she was like, that I've seen him more than any other performer. And he's
Same for
he's
me.
just like, hopefully this says enough that I can get Dave to one day just sit down and talk. But to me, like when you watch him, it's that period, that thing that you're talking about that's so relatable, that kind of speaks to where you are. And do you feel songwriting can be like that? Sometimes you're writing to a perspective that that, some people are going to totally connect with. Others may just be like, eh.
Yeah. That record that Dave made, Curse Your Branches.
Yeah.
That came out as we were kind of nearing completion on We Are All Where We Belong. And there were lyrics on his record that were so close to things that I had written that I had to change mine. And,
wow.
Because it was just like, and I'm not mad about that at all, because like there just weren't that many records talking about what those records are talking about. Like, and I love that record. I love Dave's entire catalog. He's one of my all-time favorite songwriters. They just released that new Low Tom single. I can't stop listening to it. Yeah, he's just amazing. And it's just that, like, he is just so unabashedly not full of shit. There's no line between what you see and what you get with him, I think.
Yeah.
And that's what people find so compelling. And it's definitely something that I strive to be as a songwriter too. And what you're saying about, I think that's kind of the point of all art, right? Is to you express what you're going through, and that's cathartic to you. But the real power is in when other people hear it, and all of a sudden you all know, like, I'm not alone. Like, the world is big enough to include me. And that is just the real beauty of the thing, right? It's like, that's the whole great thing about being, a lonely kid in East Texas, when you hear punk rock for the first time and you go, oh, wait, there's a place for me somewhere. There's other people out there. I just kind of have to find them. And there's a tribe that I can belong to, like my choices aren't limited to being some version of a hillbilly, there's something that's very, very important about that to me.
And it's interesting because it may relate to someone at the moment, but the people that shrug it off maybe in the beginning, it may speak to them at a different point where they remember and they are like, oh, that actually means more to me now.
Yeah. I remember when that Curse Your Branches record came out, there's another friend of mine here in town named Jason Poe. And I love Jason Poe. He's one of the sweetest dudes in the world. And he doesn't really do music much anymore, but he is in himself, like in his own right, like an amazing songwriter. He had a band called Jets Under Fire. I'm not sure if their stuff is on Spotify or not, but yeah, he has this great voice and is an amazing songwriter, but he's still a believer, or at least he was. I haven't talked to him in a little bit, but he was last time I checked. And but I remember when Curse Your Branches came out, and he's also a Bazan fan, and it was the song, what's the last song on that record? He's like, the crew have killed the captain, but they still can hear his voice. That song. He was like, that song is so sad. And I just remember feeling like I didn't really think it was sad. I kind of thought there was like some like freedom in that, and it's just one of those things where it's like, well, we were just hitting that same art with different perspectives and we had totally different reactions to it. And
it's in stitches.
Beautiful because both of our reactions,
that's what it's called.
In stitch. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's like both of our experiences with that piece of art are equally valid. Right. Like, and that's the beauty of it. Like I've always kind of had this kill the songwriter approach to it. Like where it's like what I intended with the song is kind of irrelevant to you, because it's really all about what you got out of it, which is very much informed by what you brought into it. Ooh. And art can just be that thing that becomes what you need it to be. That being said, I don't write with a lot of metaphor and stuff. It's always pretty fucking clear what I mean,
But sometimes that's more refreshing because I remember she's a really great person and mentor, Judy Stakey. When I'm always bringing a song, she's like, get rid of the just like the where it's just like the water. And she was like, no, like just get rid of it and just say what you're trying to say. Do not try to mask it in this, because I don't know, maybe sometimes that's what we think it needs to be. Just like almost relating back to the chords, it needs to be this layered, textured, if I throw in this seventh note, and it's like, no, play the power chord is the equivalent of just like, say what you want to say.
Yeah. Don't use 12 words when 4 will do, Like I always want my lyrics. I don't know how you feel about this. Like I always want my lyrics to read like a paragraph of conversation. Like I don't like the idea of having like one line, then one line, then one line, that are all kind of topical but disjointed. Like I kind of want them to be grammatically correct sentences. And
she will do that too, where she'll be like, I want you to just read it out. Just don't say anything, just read it. And then when you do, and I'm like, that makes no sense. And she was like, exactly, that doesn't make sense. And it's like, oh, thanks, Judy. But it's true. I get it. Because it should, as you're saying, it should be like a conversation. Like it should make sense if you read it. If it doesn't, you need to go back. And
I think it's something that Vonnegut said, was that any piece of art is one half of a conversation. And, I just always kind of took that to heart. And I really want all my lyrics to feel like they're conversational in some way.
So at this point, are you doing a lot of demoing? Are you preparing to do do you want to do another EP? Are you guys, especially right now?
Yeah, we're doing
look like?
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of demoing. Since the pandemic, I've got about 26 songs kind of done.
Wow.
And some are, I have like 3 or 4 that are kind of like, I'm finishing up lyrics and then I just have to record the lyrics and then they're done. But yeah, it's been real productive for me. Thankfully I've been able to keep my day job and I'm working at home, and it sucks that I can't be in the room with my buddies, shaping them. But the idea is that once this is over or safer or whatever the case may be, that we are going to do another full length. We're not going to do another EP. All of our last 4 or 5 releases have all been EPs. And I think we kind of decided we wanted to make another big statement, with our next thing and actually get in there and do something a little bit more ambitious.
I love it. Well, dude, thank you for spending time and just talking to us. I really appreciate it. I love this is the first. I love the fact that this is maybe the first real full on actually half-hour 40-minute conversation we've actually had ever.
Yeah,
it wasn't over social media, and I love it.
Yeah, it's funny, man, because you're right, but I feel like I know you.
Likewise.
And you did a song with a friend of mine not too long ago, and I remember she was asking hey, do you know this Mike Myers guy? And I was like, yeah, he's a great guy, but I'm like, I don't really know, he seems great, and I was like, I was like, yeah, on tour, man, he really helped us one time because we lost our cymbals and he got them back to us, he's a great guy, but you could be a serial killer for all I know. I mean, but
Michael Myers. I mean, I heard it all throughout first grade and second grade from people, and
I didn't even make that connection.
I was so confused as a little kid, just being like, "Why are they saying my name, Mom? They said it again." And my parents being like, "We named you after an archangel. I apologize. We should have not gone." And so There you go. But dude, let's do it again. Thank you so much for being
sure,
here
man.
and talking songwriting and guitar.
Thank you so much, man, for having me. I appreciate it.
So this is episode 13, and especially with someone like Taylor, I've known him since like 2014. This is only the second time I've had a chance to talk with him where I heard his voice. All the other times it's been Instagram and Twitter. And I think that's just funny because that's how it's like being in a band, because you meet these people on the road and you stay in contact. Almost like it's a good friendship. It's a great friendship, but you don't get to talk to them in person that much. So the fact that I've had a chance to do this was awesome, and go check out Quiet Company. Still one of my favorite bands. Okay, so we're 13 episodes in. Are you enjoying these? If you are, have you written a review on Apple Podcasts and given us a 5-star rating? If you haven't, are you waiting for me to give a tearful plea saying, please, will you write us a review, give us a rating? Because when you do, that helps us out, gets us more exposure, and makes people aware of this amazing podcast. Because here I am. Please go ahead, write that awesome 5-star review. Share your favorite episode on social media. I truly do appreciate everything that you can do to spread the word about this podcast. And that does it for this week's episode. It was edited and produced by Chris Fafalius. I'm Mike Myers. Until next time.